Well, Tesla earnings just came out and it looks like that they did beat the revenue expectation. You can see here a $28.10 billion versus the estimated $26.36 billion. But unfortunately, they had a EPS miss. So you could see it was 50 cents per share versus the estimated 54 cents per share. So kind of a mixed bag that we can see so far before the conference approaches. And you can see the after hours price action pretty much flat. For all intents and purposes, it tested the low from earlier today, but really it's only down 1.37% at this time. So for something like Tesla that has a much larger implied move, this is relatively dormant, all things considered. So one thing I do want to mention though, and something that we've seen recently is a lot of activity around the 500 and 520 strike. And we've also seen a lot of call activity just in general. And I'll get to this SPY trade in a second here because that was pretty insane, another insider trade. But if I scroll down here, you can see earlier on during the day, they posted someone just bought a $10.7 million worth Tesla at the money call that expires next week. So this was pretty big, and this is consistent with what we've been seeing in previous weeks. Just this was a much shorter dated contract. So they're going to have some big theta burn come tomorrow, an implied volatility burn as well, But this is one among many of those prints that we've seen. So if I scroll up here to show you kind of what they posted a little bit later on, it's this over here. There's a pretty substantial call wall that's formed now at this 500 strike just because of all the exposure. And if I zoom in, we can see there's $122 million worth of exposure at that 500 level for all expiration. And the meat of this is actually November option expiration and December option expiration for both of those. So something to keep in mind because there is a lot of bullish positioning for that. We'll of course see what happens just based on this earnings. But going back to the chart over here, a very key level that I've been mentioning now in these videos for the past couple of weeks actually is around 440. So 439.97 is a key level that must be reclaimed in order for bulls to have an option of going much higher. No pun intended on that. But in this case, definitely wanted to see it go above. And unfortunately, at least for Tesla, looks like it was unable to hold it based on the earnings so far. But of course, a lot of things can shake up after the call tomorrow. If you are bullish on it, you want to see an open back above, or at least a weekly close back above this level, because then it can see much higher. I'd look for beyond the existing high and honestly beyond all-time high, looking for like 500. But that is completely contingent on it holding above this around 439.97 level. Otherwise, if you're below that, you're going to see more chop, just like we've seen before from over here. So again, if you're in that bullish camp, want to follow those whales with all of those pretty aggressive calls that they've been buying, it needs to be above 439.97 in order for me to be interested. Otherwise, not interested at all, because realistically, you're just going to get chopped out. It can chop as long as it wants to. It could drop as long as it wants to. So that's my plan, at least for Tesla. Now, going back over to here to show you another thing that was super interesting from today and actually has implications going forward is some of this flow that we've been seeing. And the cheddar flow count posted twice, actually. The bears doubled down today was one thing from earlier today that they posted. So they're adding more puts, specifically the November expiration. But then also, if I go back to this over here, you can see that they posted as well the hello bears. And what's interesting as a portion of this, you can see if I scroll in, on the QQQ side, they added one-day to expiration put contracts around the money at the time. And these actually rose upwards of 150% intraday today. And they did this with decent size too. This is over 3 million in premium in total and above the ask that they executed it. So 150% on 3 million in premium is no chump change. And if I go to QQQ's chart over here, we actually can see this substantial dip from earlier today. It actually closed down 1% on the day. It was down, I think, about 1.5% at one point over here. Yeah, 1.7% actually, 1.75%. So they were very profitable on that. They added it around this time period in the previous day. And then we had this huge drawdown intraday for those one-day expiration puts to go up 150%. And even those SPY puts that are November dated were up a substantial amount as well. So another example, if I go back to over here, of very clear insider positioning, I guess we can call it, just because they did at it right before we had this news, specifically the double down they added an hour before. We had this news that the Trump administration is considering a plan to restrict globally produced exports to China made with or containing U.S. software. So it dumped on this news initially and just continued to dump the rest of the day thereafter. So they were able to make quite a bit of money on this, as they have been, especially over the course of the past 1 to 2 months now. Has really picked up in terms of the most blatantly insider trades. But for all intents and purposes, they did make quite a bit on this. So definitely continue to watch that flow to see if there's any similarities going forward, so we can catch a move before it does occur. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now on QQQ, SPY, etc. If I go to SPY positioning in terms of dark pools, though, we can see here that there was 1.4 billion of premium at that 671.31 level today. So not that large if you just look at it that way. But if we go to the start of the week, we can see this 1.5 billion plus 800 million plus 700 million and 254 million. This does equate to a little over 3 billion in premium at around this 671.30-ish level. You guys know anything over 3 billion in premium for signature dark pool prints is certainly eye-opening to me. Something I want to mark on my chart just because of its significance in terms of overall premium. So definitely going to mark this on my chart since it was the most substantial that we've seen so far this week, because you can see over here 1 billion. That's not going to move the needle. All things considered for the other one during this week. So that's an update on the dark pool side of things. And then also the gamma feature as well for SPY. There is a substantial put wall at this 668 strike, which actually it's 3.4 billion in premium, which is a very sizable amount even for SPY. So definitely noteworthy and very interesting how spot price closed right on this as well. So it kind of got pinned end of day on that level. And we could also see up here, this call wall at the 675 strike was much larger yesterday, multi-billion. I think it was close to 2 billion, maybe 1.5 billion for a little bit less. It now has substantially dropped by today, and we have this major put wall at 668 instead. So very interesting to see how that exposure has shifted ahead of Tesla earnings, as well as just the day's price movements. And this is, by the way, for all expirations, just to clarify that a bit. But very interesting to have that much exposure, definitely noteworthy. And if I go to order flow over here for the last segment of this video, something I've been noticing recently, within the past couple of weeks, is there's a lot of, I want to call it sneaky, but it kind of is a sneaky call flow into tech specifically. And I'm not talking about ETF like SPY or QQQ, because we've actually seen more so bearish, at least this week. But something like Microsoft over here for the 525 strike, a little bit out the money, 1.5 million in premium. There was some PLTR ones earlier today as well. Yeah, like this over here, very substantial amount of premium, 8.4 million and then 2.8 million over here. So over 10 million in premium for these call leaps. And these are out the money as well. You can see some NVIDIA exposure. We saw that a couple times today as well. So a lot more just call heavy exposure going into individual tech names instead of the ETFs. And then obviously Tesla as well, the 440 strike over here. This one was a clear earnings bet though. So as of now, at least before the conference call, we can check over here because it's kind of real time at the moment. If we go back to the chart, we can check Tesla. You can see nothing really changing at all in terms of Tesla right now, just really a premium burn from the market makers at the moment to get rid of those contracts. But going back to the flow really quick, did see some more Tesla call flow today. And then as I scroll down over here, you can see some more, I believe it was NVIDIA that got unusual earlier on today. If we scroll down, there's a lot of flow actually. But yeah, more so tech heavy as of recently. And here's that NVIDIA print. Not even quite 1 million in premium, but was highly unusual for the 190 strike. So decently out the money and relatively short dated expiration. So I always like to look at these, especially hot names like NVIDIA has been hot for a long time. PLTR was for a bit. SPY obviously is always interesting to look at whenever you see it highlighted in blue, just because it is very highly unusual. It gets picked up by the system. And as a result, can end up being profitable. And also some of those are flagged over here in the power alerts feature. You got to have discretion when using this, just because it's not one of those where you follow something just because it shows up as a power alert. I kind of like to use it as a scanning feature, just because it needs to fit my own trade criteria in order for me to pull the trigger, so to speak, and add that position. Otherwise, there's just too much data here, and some of them do hit, some of them don't hit. But it's more so just scan through it, find something that you find interesting from a technical basis or whatever strategy you use, and then you can kind of merge the power alert with your other strategy as well. At least that's the best success rate that I've found using a feature like this. But regardless, as always, appreciate you guys watching this video. I'll see you next time.